I'm the very new chair of the Soil Association's Board of Trustees, having taken over from Martin Nye on November the 1st this year. For the vast majority of you, you probably don't know me, so I thought I might just say a few words by way of background. So I've enjoyed a career which spans two of the big five consultancies. I've held change leadership roles at global organisations such as the BBC and HSBC, and I currently run an advertising agency based in Soho. I have 5 children, and along with my long-suffering wife, we spent the last few years restoring a small plot of land in Hampshire, learning firsthand the power and challenges of maintaining healthy soils, biodiversity, and sustainably growing. And even on a small scale, the difference that nature-friendly practices makes is extraordinary. And it has truly deepened my appreciation for farmers, growers, educators, campaigners and communities who are driving change every day, and for the support that enables them to do so. But the Soil Association isn't new to me. I've been a trustee of the board for the past 4 years, and I was able to see firsthand the innovative role that the Soil Association plays as a founding director of the Soil Association Exchange. I've recently also been chair of the governance committee, and for the last few years been deputy chair. In all, I have seen the amazing work of all parts of the Soil Association firsthand. It is a unique organisation, and the importance of the role it performs has never been more needed. It's an absolute privilege, therefore, to be stepping into the role of Chair of Trustees at such a pivotal moment. Now, a little bit of housekeeping and on with the real meeting. So firstly, thank you all for joining us for this annual general meeting. And one of the consequences of the COVID years, of course, is that we become somewhat more used to holding and attending online events such as this one. One upside of it, though, is it allows more of our members and supporters to attend. And we're delighted that we're expecting about 500 plus people to be able to join us this evening. And we're recording the event so that those who can't, we could make it more widely available to them afterwards. And yes, sometimes the systems still don't always perform how we would like. So if we do have any technology issues, just please bear with us. So everyone entering the event is automatically muted, and you can't be seen on the screen or by other attendees, but there is a chat bar where you can say hello and tell us where you're dialing in from. And thanks to those of you who've already sent us questions, I can already see questions coming in as well. You can ask questions as we go, so please post questions in the Ask a Questions tab, and we will answer as many as we can today in the chat or later in the meeting, and any questions we don't get to answer tonight, we'll respond to later. I wanted to first thank Martin Nye, who has done such an amazing job as chair since 2019. Martin has been a great personal support, and I thank him for his years of dedication to the Soil Association. He worked tirelessly through those difficult COVID pandemic years and has much to be proud of during his tenure, including the launch of the Soil Association Exchange, the research-led Innovative Farmers Network, and Wood Oaks Farm. I'm truly delighted his knowledge and leadership will continue to be able to be employed by us as he takes on the chair of the Soil Association Exchange. We've got a packed and cracking agenda tonight as follows. After I've said these few words, I'll hand over to David Hobday, who's recently joined the charity as Interim Group Resources Director, and he will update you on our financial performance and some governance matters. Followed by Helen Browning, our illustrious CEO, who will give us an overview of the past year and the plans for our 80th year. Up next is Jon Haines, an agroforestry advisor, and he will discuss our programme of work to get more trees on farms. We're also pleased to be joined by Alex Gray, who's one of our farming ambassadors, who will share the work he's been doing at Brooksby Land-Based College. We'll then have time for questions, being chaired by Managing Director of the charity, James Cashmore, before Helen closes the meeting. Hopefully this will provide you as members with a good overview of what we've been up to over the last year. There is so much more we do, and with time permitting, we could show you, but I know our guest speakers tonight will give you a sense of how important the work has been this year. And what a year, another year that has been challenging for everybody, be they farmers, growers, producers, retailers, or us as customers. And when isn't it a challenging year? The continued environmental, political, and economic turmoil impacts all of us, both individually and collectively. And whilst the media continues to cover the main stories, the cost of living crisis, high energy prices, retail inflation, sewerage pumped directly into rivers and stream by privatised water companies, the public health crisis caused by ultra-processed food and the impact of budget changes by central government. They rarely, sadly, showcase the great work done by the individuals and organisations such as ours and our partners. We've never had a greater need to influence policymakers. And we will continue to advocate for solutions that are nature-based, properly grounded in the real world, based on data, and able to deliver at scale. We continue to work to promote long-term, systemic, innovative solutions to these challenges. We'd love to do even more, and we can't do this on our own. We know that to achieve real and lasting impact, we need to join forces with citizens, communities, other organisations, and those companies that are genuinely trying to build their businesses on sustainable, organic and regenerative practices. You are a vital and much needed part in helping us to do this. So we really thank you to all of you, our supporters, for joining forces with us. We simply cannot do what we do without you. Finally, I want to thank all of our staff and my trustee colleagues for their continued commitment, professionalism and energy. It's truly inspiring. I hope you find the talks tonight equally inspiring and will continue to support us. So please feel free to encourage others to join as well, so that collectively we can have an even greater impact. I'm now going to hand over to David, our Interim Group Resources Director, to talk about finance and governance.
Thank you very much, Phil, and a very good evening to you all. So my plan is to talk through some of the financial highlights from our annual accounts for the last financial year, which ended on 31st of March. So first slide, please. Yeah. So focusing on the charity itself and starting with income, we're very fortunate that we have a wide range of different income sources, and we saw total income grow last year by 1.5 million to 9.7 million. The chart shows our main sources of income and how they've moved over the last 3 years. The green bars are the most recent. And you can see the big changes to income were significant increases in donations and in income from our trading subsidiaries. And together, those things more than compensated for a fall in our grant income. Donations increased by 1.4 million, with most of that accounted for by a single one-off corporate donation of 1.2 million. And our trading subsidiaries contributed almost £1 million more than in the previous year. This reflects two things. Firstly, a big increase in the profitability of SA Certification, our organic and forestry certification subsidiary, and that contributed profit of £1 million last year, compared to just under 400,000 in the year before. And secondly, like last year, we benefited again from significant income, which comes through another of our trading subsidiaries, from two corporate partners in support of two major food projects that began in the previous year. Grants, which are typically awarded for particular programs like Innovative Farmers, Sustainable Food Places, and our whole farm tree project, made up about a quarter of our income last year, but fell by £900,000. Economic pressures have badly impacted the fundraising environment for charities. Competition for grant funding has intensified sharply, and that's a challenge we continue to face. Income from contracts, which is mostly about our Food for Life programme commissioned by local authorities, also saw a small decline, but it was great to see that our income from memberships grew a little last year. There was also an increase in legacies. Whilst these income streams are smaller than some of our other categories, they play a really vital role in enabling us to fund core charitable activities and underpin the full range of work we do. They're extremely important to us, so we really are very grateful to all of you for your continued membership and support. We could move on to the next slide. So let's turn to expenditure. Our total expenditure last year was 9.4 million, up from 8 million in the previous year. But actually, the previous year had benefited from the release of a creditor of almost £700,000 from previous years. So on a like-for-like basis, the increase is 700,000, and the chart you see is prepared on that basis. With continuing cost pressures from inflation, we've worked really hard to try and control costs. We've contained fundraising costs at a similar level to the previous year, but we increased spend on healthy and sustainable food by around 9%, and we also increased our costs on farming and land use by 11%. If we can move on to the next slide. So the bottom line, total income less total expenditure, meant we achieved a net surplus of £267,000 last year. And that's a bit higher than the previous year, but it's also important to remember that as a charity, we have to distinguish between two different types of income and expenditure. All our funds are categorized as either restricted, and that's those funds which we can only use against very specific projects as dictated by the funder, or they're unrestricted. So funds, in this case, that are available for any of our core work. Our unrestricted funds saw a net surplus of 1.2 million last year compared to 237,000 in the previous year. On the other hand, for our restricted funds, there was a net deficit, and as you can see, they decreased by almost £1 million. But a lot of that is actually about timing. We've been progressing projects where grant income had been received up front and to a large extent in the year before. So although it is also true to say that it's often harder to ensure that restricted funding covers enough of the charity's central costs. So it's pretty important to keep the net unrestricted position in surplus. And last year's result looks very helpful in that respect, but I'm very mindful that unrestricted surplus exists, that unrestricted surplus exists only because of that big one-off £1.2 million donation, which I mentioned earlier. And thank goodness we got that. That was very fortunate. But this absolutely highlights both the level of challenge for us in keeping costs where they need to be, and the ever increasing challenge of raising sufficient funds. So that's income and expenditure as far as the charity is concerned. I've referred to the income we've received from our trading subsidiaries, and you can see more detail about that in our annual accounts. I'd like to say a few words about the group's balance sheet, and in particular, the funds or reserves that make up the net assets available to us. The key thing about our underlying funds is their importance in providing the base from which we can sustain the organisation. If we could have the next slide, please. So here's how our funds are held. A big chunk of the group's funds actually relates to other parts of the group, and most especially the Soil Association Land Trust. That's the light green part of the pie, almost half the pie in the chart. The Land Trust is a sister charity. It's a separate charity, but the Soil Association is its only member. It's therefore a part of the group. We have to consolidate it in our accounts, and we work very closely together. The vast majority of its funds are not cash and are not available to spend. They represent the value of all the farmland and buildings given to the Land Trust to hold in perpetuity. The next portion of the pie, the orange slice, represents the Soil Association's restricted funds, the funds I mentioned earlier that have been given to the charity for a very specific use, and this is the portion of those that have not yet been spent. Designated funds, which is the dark green slice, these are not restricted, but neither are they freely available to spend, as we have chosen to set them aside for a specific reason. A big part of this part of the fund is the value of our headquarters building in Bristol. So naturally, this is set aside because we need the building for our operational activities. This portion also includes the unspent portion of the corporate partnership income received for the two major food projects, which again I mentioned earlier. The remaining funds, the light blue sliver in the pie, are the free reserves, and this is the portion that is freely available for use in future years. And this portion is especially important, and charities are advised to have a reserves policy around this portion. And that's about keeping a minimum level to provide a buffer against unforeseen financial challenges. The board reviews our reserves policy regularly and has set a requirement at the end of last year to hold free reserves at between £900,000 and £1.8 million. And so you can see that at a fraction just over £1 million, the charity ended last year within range, and we started the current year from a satisfactory position. Next slide, please. Conditions, however, do remain challenging. Inflation is still a problem, and the higher national insurance rates which we incurred this year have also added very significantly to our underlying costs. We made a small reduction in headcount last year to bring our costs in line with income, and we're in the process of doing that again this year. So we are continuously looking for ways to improve our costs and efficiency. And because of the changes we've made, in the first half of the current year, the charity is showing better performance than in the same period of last year. But there is still much to do in the second half of the year, but we do remain optimistic. I feel we should also touch on our certification business here. It's a strong business, and its growth has meant its donations to us are an increasingly important part of our income stream. Certification benefited from good growth last year in the market it serves, and it continues to perform well overall. However, there are challenges here too, with many of certification's customers facing intense margin pressures, and it becomes increasingly difficult for certification to respond to that by increasing its own selling prices. The challenges reiterate to us just how important every source of income is to us. And again, I'd really like to stress how grateful we are to all of you for your continued support, which is so vital to our ongoing work. And so last slide in this section, so not too far before the end of the finance section, I'm sure you'll all be relieved to hear. So the responsibility for overseeing the way the group is governed sits with our Board of Trustees. And last year, the board commissioned an external review of governance to check on the robustness of our procedures and compliance with charity regulation. And that work finished in May. It confirmed the charity is being well governed. There were a small number of recommendations which we've implemented to improve things further, and this included clarifying and extending the remit of the board's subcommittees. Our trustees are listed on the slide. There have been a couple of changes. We've just heard about our change of chair, and Rosemary Radcliffe also stepped down in June this year. There is a recruitment campaign in progress to replace Rosemary and to identify other potential candidates to succeed other trustees who are coming towards the end of their terms too. It's worth reiterating that our trustees are all volunteers who give up their time free of charge to lead the organisation. And we try to balance the skills and experience they provide across the board. And you can see from the slide the breadth of relevant skills they bring to lead the organisation, and which helps us deliver impact in so many different areas. And to tell us more about that, it's my pleasure to hand over to our Chief Executive, Helen.
Thanks, David. Really great run through of our finances. And it's wonderful to have so many of you online with us this evening. I can't help wishing that we were all in the same room together, if I'm honest. It's always really weird projecting into the ether rather than being able to see people and actually get a response more directly from you all. So maybe in the future, we'll start to think about how can we engage more with you as members in real life rather than online. There's always so much to chat about on an evening like this, and I've only got 10 or 15 minutes. So I want to kind of talk through some of the impact we've had this year, and to look ahead a bit to some of the plans for next year. David's already talked about, and Phil too, actually, that it's been a really tough time for charities. I think a lot of charities are really struggling. And he's mentioned already that we've had to make a few redundancies in order to keep our costs under control. And that's so frustrating for us when there's so much we need to get on with in this world. There is so much for us to do. But it could have been, and I think you've already, seen this from the numbers that David has shown, it could have been so much worse if it wasn't for you and for all our other supporters and donors. And also, actually, he's emphasised the importance of the businesses that we run and the earned income that we bring in alongside the charitable donations and the trust and foundations and legacies and that kind of thing. And the businesses we are involved with and the earned income we get through things like Food for Life commissions are not just important from the financial point of view. They're really important because they extend our impact and our reach. That's why we do them fundamentally, is because it's about changing the world. And I think one of the reasons that funders really like us is that they know when they give us seed funding to get a new project or pilot going, to have a go at something new, very often we'll turn that into an ongoing, sustainable enterprise that doesn't rely on charitable donations for it to continue to have impact in the world. And that's one of the things that really excites me as somebody who's involved in business myself, trying to actually make sure that wherever possible, we're bringing the earned income in alongside the charitable donations that we need to kick off the new things and do things like our policy and our communications work. So, so examples of that are Food for Life, which, we celebrated 15 years of Food for Life this year, which is an incredibly durable project for us over such a long period of time. Lots of our staff are employed in that area, working all over the country. And our Served Here scheme, for instance, serves over 1.5 million meals a day to our standards. We're in about 25% of primary schools in England and over 50% in Scotland. That feels to me like a really notable impact. We want to do far more in this space. It should be all schools, all prisons, all hospitals that serve food to our standards. But at least we are, even in these quite difficult financial times, in there and making some headway. David's talked about how important certification is from an income point of view. But the nearly 4,000 organic businesses that they're working with are really having massive impact in the world and giving the public real confidence in food you can trust. And certification doesn't just do the certification, they do so much around promotion of organic. Things like the Boom Awards that we hold every other year, and it was a Boom Award year this year. We've just had the Organic Trade Conference in London a week or two ago. It's not just organic that certification's involved with, but in forestry. And over 28 million hectares of forests across the globe in over 70 countries are certified by us to FSC or PEFC standards. And that certification is protecting Indigenous people, it's protecting wildlife. And we're also involved in training and capacity building, particularly in low-income countries. The new kid on the block, which Phil's been involved with right from the start, is Soil Association Exchange. And that was very much nurtured in the charity by James and I a few years ago. It's now a separate business. And the whole rationale of Exchange is about how do we measure the environmental, the social, the animal welfare outcomes of farming systems? How do we then advise farmers as to how they can improve that? And how do we make sure they're being rewarded for the improvements they make? Measure, improve, reward. And really driving those benefits to farmers, including through a new thing that we set up this year, a pilot called Exchange Market, which allows the big corporates that are buying from farms or who are selling services to farms to pool their resource, to pool funds, which we can channel back to farmers so that they can improve, in this first instance, their climate emissions. That feels like a really exciting, innovative approach to supporting farming in a new way. We've now got what's probably the biggest holistic data set in the UK on those environmental, social, and animal welfare outcomes. And those insights are really enabling us to help farmers improve what they do and to help policymakers potentially too understand what techniques are working best on the ground. So the earned income side of the equation is very much about reach and impact, as well as financial resource. Other successes that are top of my list this year, and it's always a bit invidious to pick on a few, but I was really excited that we celebrated the 150th field lab within our Innovative Farmers programme this year, and that's led to government now launching the Adopt scheme, which is bigger sums of money than we can give out to farmers who, again, want to club together. It's been really inspired by Innovative Farmers. Farmers coming together to want to tackle a new challenge can now apply for between £50,000 and £100,000 to do that research on their farms. This is a real game changer. We've long wanted to make sure that farmers are in the driving seat of research, and actually they are recognised and rewarded for the innovation that they're doing on the farm. We know that most of the best innovation in the world comes from farmers themselves. A big one for me too, because animal welfare has always been a huge part of my own personal motivation towards organic, is the development of the Good Life framework, which has flowed from our partnership with Ocado. Most of the work in animal welfare in the past has been all about trying to avoid the bad things, the lameness or the cages or whatever it might be, and not enough attention to what animals really need to have a good life, what brings them joy and pleasure. And the development of the Good Life framework, which we'll be rolling out and working with corporates and hopefully internally too, will allow us to really encourage farmers to think and understand how the resources they can provide can give those animals the life they deserve. Our policy team has worked really hard on trying to secure organic funding over the last 12 months. You'll be aware how much under threat it is. We've had success in securing support in Wales and in Scotland, and to be honest, it's even more of a battle in England. We thought we were getting somewhere with reinstating organic conversion grants, and then all the ministers changed and we're back to square one. But we'll be fighting hard to make sure that more farmers can be supported through the conversion. We know that we need more organic farmers in the UK. The market's growing quickly, but there isn't enough production in some areas. So we really will be pushing hard for that over the next year. On sustainable food places, we now have 117 of those around the country, and that's impacting over 24 million people. So again, that long-running programme is still having tremendous traction in the world and really helping communities come together around food. Our Out to Lunch campaign, which again is another long-running one, and we turn a spotlight on different sectors each year, has led this year to restaurants pledging changes that will improve 20 million meals a month. The power of a league table in stimulating corporates to up their game is really quite remarkable. We recently hosted our second Agroforestry show in partnership with the Woodland Trust, great partners for us on our trees work at Wood Oaks. And we also published the new handbook, which is flying off the shelves. So really good to be able to republish the Agroforestry handbook, which was the first one in the UK, and to have been able to bring together over 1,000 people to learn about agroforestry last year. And talking of Wood Oaks, we've heard about the Soil Association Land Trust, our sister charity, There's been huge progress there this year, particularly at Wood Oaks, in that we've managed to secure a Heritage Lottery Fund grant for the development of a visitor centre and the historic Black Barn there, and to really support community activities there over the next few years. And we did a capital appeal to secure the match funding for that grant, which was very successful. So that's all steam ahead. And it's amazing what's happening on the ground there. That farm, for those of you who don't know it, is just off the M25 up near Maple Cross. Do go along and see what we're up to there, bringing in new entrants, lots of dynamic stuff happening there. So I think this is all quite a lot of achievement for a small charity. And I do hope it gives you confidence that when you support and join us, that your support will have long-lasting and game-changing results. There's still so much to do, of course, and next year we'll be 80. So we're starting to make plans as to how we can both celebrate, but actually much more importantly than that, how can we jet propel our mission even further? We're going to have to do this on tiny budgets, but we really do need to think about the next decade or 2 or 3, the next 80 years, and make sure that we can really play our part as much as we possibly can. We're going to be leading with a nature theme, but one of the things I'd really love your input on as members is how do we going right back to one of our founding objectives, how do we really make more progress on developing that informed body of public opinion that was talked about and, as I say, right there in our founding objectives? How can we get cut through to the many thoughtful people like you who would like to engage with us and learn more from us and be part of our movement if they knew about us? How can we empower many more people to be confident in their advocacy and in their actions in their daily lives? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you can chuck anything in the chat or email me afterwards, I'd just really like to know how we can do more to really help many more people engage and understand and be part of our movement. Next year, I'll also be celebrating 40 years as an organic farmer, and nearly all of that time I've been involved with the Soil Association in some way. Starting off, initially as a licensee, but I very quickly got involved with British Organic Farmers. I think I saw Bill Starling name crop up in the attendees this evening. It's lovely to see our old friends like Bill and Eve on the line. And through all of that time, and then as a trustee and as chair, and then coming back into this role, it remains such an honor to lead this dynamic, holistic, entrepreneurial charity with such amazing people as colleagues and supporters. Next year, we're going to tell many stories about that pioneering community, of our successes and achievements, but also, as I say, really setting our sights on what needs to come next, what needs to happen now to ensure that in 80 years' time, the world will be the one our founders aspired to. In my own farming life, as my daughter takes over the mainstream farming with her husband here, I've been able to concentrate more of my time when I'm on the farm to my enthusiasm for trees and agroforestry. It's something that I couldn't do during most of my farming career because I'm a tenant farmer and landlords don't like you planting trees all over their farm. But now I've got a bit of land that I can plant trees on, and we've been doing lots of that stuff over the last 10 years, and it's sort of starting to come to fruition, which is really exciting. So I'm delighted that we've got a bit of a focus on that to come now, and I'm going to hand over to Jon Haines, one of our agroforestry advisors, whose work is all about championing trees on farms. Jon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Hope everyone can hear me. So my name's Jon Haines. I'm an agroforestry advisor here at the Soil Association. I work within the FLU, so the Farming and Land Use team. And so there's a fairly sizable group of us advisors that support farmers across the spectrum. So my role very much about trees and agroforestry, but there are different advisors tackling all sorts of different challenges. So can I have the next slide, please, Gemma? Great. Okay, so I thought I'd start with a very sort of basic introduction on what is agroforestry for anyone that isn't in the know. And it's sort of, in its most basic term, it's farming with trees. Trees obviously feature heavily in some landscapes. In some landscapes they don't. But there are benefits to be gained from integrating trees within farming systems. So we aim to keep the definition as broad as possible. We want to include trees in as many forms, you know, as we can. So whether that's hedgerows and hedgerow trees, maybe on-farm woodlands, trees in the middle of fields, trees around the outside, orchards, trees next to waterways. The list goes on and on and on. So really broad. Can I have the next slide, please, Gemma? So obtaining sort of benefits from agroforestry is really interesting. I feel society as a whole, perhaps I'm biased, but views trees quite positively. Perhaps focusing more on the sort of benefits for wildlife, potentially historic or cultural elements of having trees within a landscape, and they all count. Those benefits all count within a farming context, but we can really see and start talking about tangible benefits for farming systems. So it varies hugely between obviously different types of farming, but also different areas as well. On livestock farms, we might most obviously talk about shelter and shade. So shelter in sort of periods of bad weather. Good example here. And yeah, the snow on the picture on the left. So we know that the ground temperature under trees, even as this one, without any leaves on in the winter, can be 6 degrees warmer than neighbouring pasture. And so that's what's happening in this picture is those snow will have fallen, it will have melted, providing continued access to the sheep in this picture, but also acting as a really good sort of refuge for animals to shelter in periods of cold. And the same applies during sunny, you know, hot heat events. Shade from trees can be really beneficial. We know dairy cattle, particularly typical dairy breeds, will start expressing heat stress at 18 degrees. So actually, really not that warm, especially sort of considering recent changes to extreme weather, summer weather events and things like that. So having access to trees allows animals to express their natural behavior and find shade, which is really important. Another element that is really exciting and we see a lot of interest from farmers is the browse opportunity of agroforestry. So it's sort of can livestock access nutrients and minerals that cannot be obtained maybe from grass or their typical forage, and trees are a really good example of this. That eaten in small amounts can definitely add nutritional benefit to livestock diets. And again, it's about allowing animals to express their natural behaviors, and browsing trees is definitely one of them. Moving, and I'm very conscious that I've got sort of 10 minutes to cover quite a big topic, but sort of highlighting a couple of benefits maybe for sort of arable agriculture. And the photo on the right-hand side is showing a typical, I guess, agroforestry system where trees, in this case apple trees, have been planted in straight rows, which allows mechanization to continue within the field, and then allowing a set space for crops to be grown between rows of trees. And the rows of trees can really help create a positive microclimate, which can benefit crop production between them. So we think about maybe reducing wind speeds, and maybe allowing shade to reduce evapotranspiration rates and things like that. So lots of potential benefits. And I guess this is sort of before even considering maybe in this case the apples as an additional something additionally to sell, or you know, maybe timber or firewood or something like that as sort of different systems. Yeah, so next slide, please, Gemma. Okay, so just touch on our Trees on Farm program, and we're sort of it's evolved. It's been going now maybe about 7 years. So I've only been at the Soil Association myself just short of 3 years now. But colleagues have started it, and I think initially it was around raising awareness of agroforestry. So that was obviously awareness with farmers, but also different organisations, the government, and things like that. And I feel now that it's moved on. You know, it's very much now about encouraging uptake, less so about raising awareness, as people know. They feels like they know what agroforestry is, and some of its benefits as well. Sort of our current program focuses on sort of encouraging farmer to farmer knowledge, knowledge exchange, and tries to make it accessible for all farmers to implement. So whether that's, you know, growing vegetables, or a livestock farmer in different parts of the country and things like that. So it's trying to bring it all together and make sure that we're offering something for everyone. It's definitely more than just tree planting. There's a risk, I think, that we plant trees necessarily for the sake of it, but because we believe it's a good thing. We need, for it to succeed, we need farmers to see the value trees deliver to their farming businesses, because establishing trees is a lot of work, you know, and so we really need to see that value as a sort of a carrot. I'll run through a couple of the sort of key elements of the program. Next slide, please, Gemma. Thanks. So yeah, so Helen touched on it earlier, the agroforestry show. So this was held in early September at Wood Oaks Farm, a land trust farm near London. We had sort of highlight. We had about over 1,000 attendees across the 2 days. So this was the second agroforestry show. First one was held in 2023. It was a fantastic sort of celebration of agroforestry. It touched it touched all different elements of it. It had experts from lots of different fields coming together to talk about the benefits of agroforestry and why it's something we should sort of invest in. It was received really well, and we're sort of now in discussion with the partner organisation. So it was, as Helen mentioned, it was jointly held with the Woodland Trust, but other organisations on how we can best move the show forward. You know, what does it need to achieve next time, and how does the sort of future of it all look? Next slide, please. Most of my work is on developing, maintaining agroforestry networks. So these are groups of farmers that come together to share agroforestry knowledge and experience amongst themselves. And typically, they are focused around a sort of a region and tend to be sort of a farming type. So we've got the Cornish Agroforestry Network, obviously a range of different farmers in Cornwall, all interested in agroforestry, sort of different areas, for example. It's based around sort of maybe a farm, maybe 1 or 2 farm walks a year, and then a WhatsApp group community and a periodic newsletter sending out sort of latest research, case studies, things like that. We've recently started groups that are centered on topics, so specific topics. For example, Trees for Livestock group, which looks at, as I mentioned previously, that the benefits livestock can have from browsing trees, and how you might plant trees to encourage that sort of behaviour. And then another one was organic tree nurseries, which is definitely worth a shout out. Next slide, please, Gemma. So again, Helen mentioned this, but we've built on the first edition of the Agroforestry Handbook, which I believe is the most downloaded PDF here at the Soil Association. I'm worried my colleagues will prove me wrong for that, but this is what I've heard. So fantastic resource. It's widely acknowledged as sort of a leading resource in agroforestry, not just in the UK, but also further afield as well. And we can see, where it's downloaded and sort of the interest that it causes. So the second edition, sort of, it's been 6 years since the first edition. We've updated sort of latest research, included a lot more photos, put more detailed case studies in, and I guess the farms that featured in the initial handbook have now got a lot more information to tell. So it's been really good. It also includes an additional chapter on farm woodland, and one on resilience, which is sort of increasingly important. I guess an increasingly important reason farmers are coming to agroforestry. It's available to buy online. And then the last slide, please, Gemma. So our last sort of stream is agroforestry ambassadors. We currently have 7, and this is very much all around sort of elevating farmer voices. So farmers that are practicing agroforestry. Pictured here is Dave from Cornwall, Dave Oates, and the ambassador program provides sort of media and storytelling training to sort of amplify ambassadors' voices, storytelling opportunities, and Dave has also hosted Farm Walk for us and runs the agroforestry Cornish Agroforestry Network also. So I guess perfect opportunity to hand over to Alex Gray, another farming ambassador here, and yeah, so Alex, you brilliant, thank you.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to go through this. I've only got 15 minutes. There's an awful lot of content. First, I wanted to respond to a question I saw in the chat, people saying, is agroforestry on the land-based curriculum? No, it isn't, and it should be. There is intention to. It's something I am actively involved in trying to get embedded. But anyway, moving forward. So next slide. This is Brooksby College. So I am a lecturer and land management sort of project manager on the estate. It's a very typical Midlands farm. Roughly half of it's arable, half of it is grass, with the dark green areas being woodland. We've also started to expand into agroforestry. So in 2020, we put in our first agroforestry scheme, and that's been quite successful. Next slide, please. So this is where we started. This is much more the conventional agroforestry that people are familiar with now, rows of trees. So this project sees 6 rows in a 20-acre field, formerly arable, put over to permanent pasture with diverse herbal lays. These trees are fenced off from the livestock with posts, single strand of electric fencing, and then we mob graze in between. I've also seen quite a few messages about the impact of livestock in the environment, and this is where the sort of nuance comes in. The Soil Association is all about less livestock done better, and this is a prime example. Mob grazing alongside trees is a way of allowing animals to demonstrate their natural ecology, generate food for us, but also their grazing behavior and the way they move through the landscape helps to build soil organic matter. But I'll come back to that in a minute. Next slide. So another key point, thing that we've been doing on the estate is mulching. Mulching has proved to be an essential part of agroforestry. When you're planting trees in field, you really need to heavily mulch those trees. Those trees are going from a sort of woodland nursery environment to a perhaps formerly arable land or land which has less organic matter. The soil hasn't yet caught up. So trapping in that moisture with mulch is key. And one of the points I wanted to make is on our estate, this involves managing the woodlands better. So when we're managing the woodlands for ecological outcomes, the material that comes out of it, we are chipping up, mulching, using our resources on site more efficiently. So that's a key point. And this year in particular, the exceptional drought, that's been an absolute lifesaver. Next slide, please. There's another example there. Another one is timber utilization. Now, there's going to be a lot of tree fans out there, and I don't want to alarm anybody because I'm a big tree fan myself. But one of the secrets to sustainable management is making everything make economic sense whilst not sacrificing on the environmental opportunity benefits. So if we have any wind-blown trees, also if we're thinning out non-desirable non-native species, things like larch, then we are actually milling this timber on site and utilizing it to build regenerative infrastructure. Next slide, please. So here's an example. This is my right-hand man, JP, and he is planking up what was a fallen oak. Beautiful thing that it was. But that timber will now be utilized. That will turn into a grand dining table for in the old hall, Brooksby Hall, and the carbon within that wood will be sequestered. Even the sawdust that's coming out of that is used both in livestock bedding to absorb some of that moisture, is then composted and then put back onto the land. Next slide, please. And this just goes to show a considerable amount of usable timber can be got from material that needs to come out anyway from an ecological point of view. Oh, sorry, next slide. Yeah. So just whizzing back, just another point. So the fencing that we put in to exclude the livestock from the trees, we've ecologically enhanced that. So the logs and other little waste material, we've put that on the top of every single one of these fence posts, drills holes in it, and it's suddenly become a biodiversity haven. Also signage, all sorts of other things around the farm is all made out of waste material. Waste thinned timber as part of the sustainable management of the habitat. Next slide. Pigs. So to understand the sustainability credentials of pigs, you have to appreciate that wild boar and wild cattle were a natural part of our ecosystem, and they've co-evolved with the ecosystem. With that in mind, pigs in particular, they play a key role in the distribution of seeds and also the slight management of the ground layer of the woodland habitat. So what we've been doing is we've been incorporating pigs into our woodlands, done in a very sensitive way. Next slide, please. So pigs, for example, they will eat a lot of the apples that are forming on the trees. We have many crabapple trees, feral apple trees in our woods, plus the oak, the acorns, the oak, huge mast year we've had. These acorns are pockets of protein and fat that are utilized by pigs that are otherwise going to waste. When it comes to animal welfare, I can assure you a woodland raised pig foraging in the undergrowth is one of the happiest animals I've ever seen. But the important thing to note, the sustainability credentials to this, are that the pigs are undertaking an ecosystem service. It's essential to note that fewer animals is important from a sustainability point of view, but a landscape devoid of any animals is one which doesn't quite function as the ecosystem intended. And given that we have heavily fragmented the UK with roads, railways, etc., it's not necessarily practical to do this with non-domesticated livestock. Anyway, moving forward. Next slide. I'll just show you this video because it's cute. Okay. So these pigs are utilizing what I would call, well, potentially waste material. So wild berries, apple pressings from a local cider company. And the beauty of this is actually part of a student experiment. We're going to go and monitor the pig poo and see to what extent the seeds are germinating through their dung. So effectively, the pigs, yes, their existence does emit some carbon, but while they're here, they're distributing seeds, they're managing the undergrowth, and their impact is as minimized as possible. Yes, you're quite, I've just seen a comment, Alex, are pigs fed on grains? A part of their diet is fed on grains, soaked, fermented grains. You can't get away from that. There are ways of feeding them on more waste materials, such as brewers' waste. But anyway, I mustn't get sidetracked. I've got very limited time. Anyway, moving forward, utilizing existing woodlands is one of the most immediate ways that we can have an impact on we can get into agroforestry quickly. And it's very important that we're choosing with plantation woodlands. We're not going into ancient woodlands or things like that. These are plantation woodlands which we're using for agricultural sort of light touch use, generating a bit of disturbance, providing habitat for the pigs, but also generating, you know, some biodiversity at the same time. Next. Hedges. So another way to offset the emissions of livestock is through the tremendous network of hedges that we have in the UK. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is simply by not giving them a short back and sides every single year. So what we've started to do is cut our hedgerows less, let them grow much taller, and that growth helps sequester and offset some of the carbon that comes from the livestock production on the farm. Also, we're spending less money paying someone to cut the hedges, so we're winning twice over. What we do is we cut one side one year, we rest it, we cut the other side, we rest it, and then we incrementally cut higher and higher each year, and then we lay the hedge. Next slide, please. We're also using trees within river restoration. So we've been doing a project with Trent Rivers Trust and the Environment Agency. What we've done is where we thinned out some poplar trees to allow more light to get to the ground floor, the ground layer. These surplus trees, which don't have much firewood value, we've laid in the river channel to re-wiggle the river. So trees and the rising material on the estate is actually being used in river restoration as well. Next slide, please. And that's just an example of it in situ. You have to anchor the trees in the bank to stop the river blasting it away, but it's worked really well. It worked actually within hours. It was starting to change the flow of the river. Next slide, please. And this is also just to show you that sustainable livestock production done in the right light touch way can help encourage good woodland management. So this is an area of hazel coppice that the students have managed. The The hazel that has arisen from this is used to provide the stakes and the binders for the hedge laying. And then the life of those stakes and binders is actually longer than the life, the time that the hazel will have grown back before they've fully rotten away. So it is continually cycling carbon. Similarly, we have on the other side, we've got students knocking in some sweet chestnut tree guards. So we put in 100 trees within our field to provide cover for the sheep, but we've individually guarded them because I've given up trying to restrain sheep with electric fencing. Next slide, please. That's it. So thank you for listening. And I'm just going to hand over to James Cashmore, who's going to go through the Q&A.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, really great presentation. Well done. And thanks to Jon as well. So we're on to that part of the evening where we have the opportunity to take your questions. And it's been great to see so much conversation in the chat too. I fear we might not get to every question. We had some that were submitted in advance, and I see we have coming up for a dozen or so that have been submitted on the night. But if we can't answer each question this evening, we will send a reply directly after the event in writing. And then we will have some minutes that are circulated from this AGM that deals with some of the questions as well, if you're looking for a written record. But without further ado, let's get on to the first of the pre-submitted questions. I think we'll take 5 or 6 of these. So Kathy, I think, thanks very much for joining from our campaigns team. I think this first one's for you. Exactly what is being done to ban glyphosate and other pesticides?
Thanks, James, and hi, everyone. Unfortunately, despite growing awareness of their impact on human health and the environment, the use of pesticides on farmland around the world continues to rise. Highly hazardous pesticides like glyphosate are not used in organic farming, and the Soil Association is working with farmers of all types to transition to nature-friendly farming that doesn't rely on these pesticides. We've welcomed the UK government's pledge to completely ban the use of bee-killing neonicotinoid pesticides. We've welcomed the long overdue publication of the Pesticides National Action Plan and the government's commitment to the Global Biodiversity Framework, which both aim to reduce pesticide-related environmental harm. We'll continue to call on UK governments to support farmers to move away from reliance on these pesticides, including the threats they pose to humans and wildlife.
Thanks, Kathy. So it sounds like you and our policy advocacy team across the UK has got plenty more work to do yet on this issue. Thanks. Helen, I think you'll perhaps go for the next one. We've probably all heard a little bit, or maybe we haven't, I don't know, about regenerative farming. It seems to be a term that's cropping up a little bit more alongside organic. Organic or regenerative, which is it for you, and how particularly will the Soil Association protect the integrity of our organic symbol?
Thanks, James. Yeah, it's a really hot debate around the place. And I think overall, we really welcome the enthusiasm that there is around regenerative farming in many ways, because it does feel like it's a real farmers starting to move en masse towards wanting to do things better. There's a real sense of change and energy and innovation amongst the farming community, particularly a lot of the younger farmers. But there are kind of some real risks when the term moves from being part of the farmer's kind of lexicon to it becoming claims on products on shelves. If those brands and retailers aren't really clear about what they mean, because there's no definition of regenerative in the way there is for organic. And that's one of its benefits, because it allows, it's a broad church, allows people to start on a bit of a route map. But we do need to be able to quantify really what does that look like. And that's one of the reasons we developed Soil Association Exchange as a way of being able to really look at the outcomes from the farming system, whether that be regenerative or anything else. And we also need to be really clear that organic is the only regulated standard, and that consumers can have real confidence around that. It's not a sort of vague term. It's very specific in its requirements. And we need to do that while not discouraging, as I say, farmers, mainstream farmers, from making steps in the right direction. So we're kind of, in the middle of a really important debate. An organic farmer said to me the other day that they think regenerative will be the making of organic. And there's no doubt that a lot of farmers that are starting on their regenerative path are ending up deciding, gosh, this isn't so difficult after all, or maybe I can go that step further and become organic. So we're learning a lot from each other. There's stuff that the regen movement, I think, is bringing to the organic movement. And overall, I think it's really important that we're a broad church. We welcome everybody in while being really proud and confident about what organic delivers.
Great, thanks, Helen. I heard this phrase, the best of organic is regenerative and the best of regenerative is organic. And that seems quite similar to what you're saying. Right, on to quite a topical question. There's a COP coming up quite soon, in case you hadn't noticed. And this is a question about soil care. So are we going to get involved? Kathy, I think you're going to take this one. Are we going to get involved at COP this time around to make sure soil care is on the agenda as a mitigator of climate change? And what do we share with COP? What activities? And I think you've written a blog on this on our website fairly recently. So just in case anyone hasn't come across that already, yeah, just great to get your thoughts on what we're doing at COP.
Great, thanks, James. First of all, we'd love to see a discussion at the COP on soil health because it's such an important contributor to climate change mitigation. But there's still so much to do to make soil famous in this regard and so many other regards. We're working with farmers across the UK to build resilience to climate change and help reduce emissions, and building soil health is a huge part of this. We don't have representation at the COP, unfortunately, but we've, as James said, we've been reporting about how governments must commit to changes in food and farming practices to help save the climate. And please do have a read of the full blog on our website if you are interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And yeah, as Soil Association members, I'd be really interested to hear perhaps anyone that's got a view in the chat about the effort that we should put into these big showpiece events like COP versus kind of day-to-day work on the ground. Just any perspectives you have on that, I think would be really useful for us to hear. So do chat away if you'd like to. All right, on to a practical question. Jon, I think you're going to take this one, and it's about bees. We all love bees, and there's a good reason why we do. So what can we do more to protect our bees? Jon.
Thanks, James. Yeah, always happy to get practical questions. Gardeners certainly can make a big difference to bees by planting a sort of diverse range of bee-friendly plants, and I guess as an agroforestry advisor, I've got to plug trees. I think trees are a sort of a fantastic resource, whether that's fruit trees, obviously like apple, pear. Helen perhaps can tell us more about her almond, her very early flowering almond trees. But other trees as well, less known, so maybe hazel trees and things like that produce very early pollen, which is really important for different types of bees, but also queen bees when they wake up really early in the season. So it's about planning a calendar full of bee food, basically. Hopefully that helps.
We all need to eat all year, and that includes the bees, Jon. Yeah, absolutely. A calendar of bee food. I love that. All right. So one of the things about the Soil Association is we pride ourselves on working farm to fork. So all the way through from production, which we spent quite a lot of time on, the farming end, if you like, through to the consumption end of our food system. And unless we all think in that joined up way, we're probably going to end up with some unintended consequences. So this is a question about ultra processed foods. Now, I'm guessing most people have probably heard about ultra processed foods, certainly a topic that has come up in the media agenda, and we've been quite involved in that for a number of years. So yeah, question about that issue of ultra processed foods. Kathy, what's the response of the Soil Association to that issue? I know you've done an awful lot of work in this area.
Thanks, James. The Soil Association is perhaps the most active UK NGO on this issue, you may be surprised to know. We've run 2 citizens' engagement campaigns calling for government action to address the dominance of ultra-processed foods in diet and support people to help to eat more whole and minimally processed food. So thank you to everybody who might be on this call who supported those campaigns. We really rely on you for that. We've also worked with media to raise concerns about UPFs, ultra-processed foods. We've fed in solutions to UK government evidence gathering for its food strategy, which is ongoing at the moment. We've convened NGOs around this issue. We've contributed to academic papers and expert panels. We've worked with MPs to ask parliamentary questions on the topic, and we've helped caterers in schools, hospitals and nurseries to reduce their use of ultra-processed foods.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And yeah, really important issue for us. Here in the UK, we have the most highly processed diet in Europe, and particularly for our children, actually. I think it's the case, isn't it, that is it around 60% of calories for children in the UK under 18 to consume through ultra-processed foods is a frightening statistic. So yeah, great progress on that work, but so much more still to do. Thanks. And then we'll take one final pre-prepared question all the way back to the farm. So just and this is a question, Alex, perhaps you could answer if you're with us. Yeah, just about soil health. So how would you describe soil health overall in the UK, and what can we do as individual gardeners or as farmers to help stop soil degradation? Yeah, any insights that you have from the farm face, as it were?
Sure. Soil health on the whole is obviously taken a bit of a hammering post-war in order to meet all these food production needs. But there are lots of practical ways that you can greatly improve it. So for instance, the first thing is keeping soil covered. When soil is exposed to the air, it is it's hemorrhaging moisture. And if you've turned over the soil, the bacteria, when they're exposed to oxygen, will start to convert that organic matter into CO2. That isn't a good thing. You want to keep the soil covered, either with mulch, cover crops, anything. You can buy these even for garden scale, things like mustard, phacelia. Cover your beds when you're not growing in them. Feeding the soil is a good one. So getting as much organic matter in there as you can, whether it's leaves, leaf litter, compost, complex organic matter, feed the microbes, feed the fungi in the soil, and they will break it down into all the nutrients that your plants need. Minimize soil disturbance if you can. Less digging, the better. Try no-dig gardening if you can. Also, just simple practical things like use a garden fork rather than a spade. You're going to disturb slightly less. The other one that's key is increasing plant diversity. So grow a wider range of things if it's in a garden or on a farm, and also try out perennial plants. If you can grow more perennial crops, then you'll need to disturb the soils less than you otherwise would if you're buying in annuals every single year. Annuals are valuable. Annuals are part of the ecosystem as well, but get some more perennials in there would be a very good idea. And they're deeper rooting. You're more resilient if we have a hosepipe ban. And also minimize chemical use. Don't go straight for the slug pellets and things like this. Think of better alternatives. So put a pond in your garden, put a pond on your farm. You'll generate frogs, which are little automatons which go around the garden eating slugs for you. And they're nice things to look at compared to an empty bottle of slug pellets.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. So great practical advice there. I was almost taking some notes for my weekend coming up. All right, so we're getting close to time, but I'm going to just take the opportunity to put a couple of final questions that were put on the night to Helen, if that is okay. And just looking at the questions, thanks for everyone that's submitted. If we don't get to them, we will respond. But I see that there are a couple in relation to organic farming and climate change. So I'm just going to combine the questions, if that's okay. One from Peter Hurst and one from Miranda Simmons. So Helen, how does climate change how does organic farming rather kind of respond in relation to the changing climate, and particularly what role is the Soil Association playing on that, helping organic farmers in particular, adapt to our changing climate?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's something all of us farmers are, it's really come up the agenda, even for those farmers who were, a bit agnostic on the whole climate issue. I think everybody's starting to recognize that we're getting such unpredictable and long-lasting weather patterns now, that this summer's drought and last winter's, well, 2 years of incredibly wet weather. And I think all the stuff we're about is about resilience. I mean, soils themselves, if you're going to adapt to climate change, you need great soils in great health. They not only lock up more carbon, but they're going to hold more water in a drought time. They're going to reduce flooding risk. Trees, we've talked about massively tonight. Trees are a huge part of the adaptation toolbox for farmers. And all the work we're doing on trees on farms is really about getting farmers to see trees as their friend, not as the foe. When you think of the sort of upset sometimes people have around tree planting, trees will be vital if our animals are going to be happy and getting shade and shelter, and if our crops are going to get protected too. So I think a lot of those kind of core things, actually, the more we work with nature, the more resilient we'll become to climate change. And I think us helping all farms start to think about what's that natural infrastructure we need in place to allow us to cope with what's coming, it's going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. And sometimes I'm thinking about things like, okay, do we need to put some more ponds and reservoirs and those kind of things in on our farm as well? But yeah, I think all of the work that we're doing is really being welcomed by the farming community as they start to anticipate the challenges that climate change is going to bring.
Great, thanks, Helen. And yeah, just a final question then. If everyone will excuse me, I don't want to eat too far into everyone's evenings. Just again, going back to the consumption end and thinking about our reliance on imports in the UK from a food perspective, and the importance of food security, which we tend to hear about when things go wrong, don't we? But that whole question of the resilience of the UK's food system and our food security situation, should we be doing more on that? And if so, what could we be doing?
Yeah, I think really important. Sometimes I sort of bridle slightly at the food security question because it has been used by some people to promote the idea of business as usual, that we need to continue farming with as many chemicals, and it's a sort of excuse for not changing. But actually, we've done lots of work at the Soil Association modelling what if we went organic across the UK, across Europe. What that would look like in terms of food, and we're very confident that our methods can feed the population well, while also reducing our impacts on climate and on nature and everything else. So we know that a future where organic is the predominant way of going forward, organic and regenerative type farming systems are the norm, can feed us well. What really worries me is that we are losing skills and not developing the skills we need amongst the population. And a lot of our focus has been on trying to really help produce more in the way of horticulture, where you produce a lot of food on not very big areas, fruit, where we import over 85% of our fruit into the UK at the moment, and things like pulses, which have such opportunity to feed people affordably and well. We know we need more of them in our diet. So those are some of the areas where we're really trying to make the case for more support, more effort to go in. So yeah, it's an important argument. We can do this, but if we don't have the soils and the people and the skills, we will struggle into the future. And we need to make that case to government and policymakers.
Great, thanks, Helen. And that's probably a good note to end. Apologies to those questions that we haven't got to. I can see tons all the way through from our position on genetic engineering, a few questions on meat, quite a few questions on water, and we will get to all of those. Even a question on Japanese knotweed just at the end there. That's a perennial problem. Certainly it is where I live. But yeah, I think that is all we have time for in terms of questions. So Helen, I'm just going to hand back to you just to close the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And yeah, thank you everybody for being with us this evening. It's been great to hear from so many of you in the chat. And I can see actually a lot of the time you've been answering each other's questions in the chat, which is fantastic. You've saved us a job, and you've certainly had lots of debate, I think, on some issues from what I believe to see. As both Phil and I have said, we so appreciate the support you give to us, the enthusiasm you have for our work. And I'd particularly like to thank Alex and Jon for talking about agroforestry today. I hope that's been up to your enthusiasm for that side of our work even more. And cheeky plug, there's an appeal coming out, I think, very imminently on that theme. So if you want to support that, that's also brilliant. Do also please get in touch with your stories and thoughts about how we can best celebrate our 80th anniversary and how we can continue to engage with you more. Again, I've seen some stuff in the chat and I'm going to look at that after the event, but would love to hear more. I know there are people who've been involved in the Soil Association for a very long time in this meeting tonight. And I'd love to know more about your history and your recollections of some of the earlier days, because we'd really like to bring that to life. We know that when we look to the past, we learn a lot about today and where we need to go in the future. And I really look forward to a bumper edition of the AGM next year as we celebrate and really hope to bring a lot of colour to that year. So see you then, if not before. I hope we see you along the way at events and that kind of stuff. And thank you from us all. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye.